Tucson, Arizona, April 21st, 2012. A Saturday morning, a father wakes up on the couch where he'd fallen asleep watching TV the night before. He walks to his bedroom, goes back to sleep. A little while later, he gets up again, makes his way down the hall. He opens the door to his 6-year-old daughter's bedroom to wake her up. She isn't there. Her window is open. The screen has been removed and propped against the side of the house. Isabel Celis is gone. What followed was one of the most heartbreaking missing child cases in Arizona history. A community that searched desperately for answers. A family torn apart by suspicion. A case that went cold for 5 years. A killer who walked free right there in Tucson while Isabel's parents kept her bedroom ready for the day she came home. That day never came, but justice eventually did. 12 years later, this is the story of Isabel Celis, and this one is going to stay with you. Before any of this, there was just a little girl. Isabel Mercedes Celis was born on September 7th, 2005 in Tucson, Arizona. She was 6 years old and in first grade when she disappeared. By all accounts, she was bright, energetic, and full of life, the kind of kid who lit up a room. Her family lived on the east side of Tucson. Her parents, Sergio and Rebecca, known as Becky, raised her alongside 2 older brothers. Rebecca was a registered nurse. Sergio worked locally. They were a normal family in a normal neighborhood doing normal things. On the night of April 20th, 2012, Isabel went to bed at around 11 p.m. Her father Sergio fell asleep on the couch while watching television. Rebecca had an early shift. She left her work in the early hours of the morning without checking on Isabel, something she later said she didn't think twice about. It was a normal night. But somewhere between that last good night and 8 a.m. the following morning, someone came through her window and Isabel was gone. At around 8 a.m. on April 21st, Sergio went to Isabel's bedroom to wake her up. She wasn't there. Her oldest brother noticed the window was open. The screen had been removed from the outside and propped against the wall. Sergio called 911 at 8:14 a.m. That phone call would be played, dissected, and debated for years because Sergio's voice on that call was calm, almost too calm. At one point, he even chuckled, making a comment about his wife needing to get her butt home. For a father who had just discovered his 6-year-old daughter was missing, it struck people as wrong. Rebecca returned home shortly after and made her own 911 call. The contrast was immediate. She was frantic, desperate, barely able to speak. Her older son, Sergio Jr., made a call too, clearly distraught. Sergio Sr.'s call sounded different, and people noticed. What follows in the days and weeks after Isabel's disappearance was an enormous community effort. Tucson came together. Volunteers searched the surrounding areas. Billboards went up across the city with Isabel's face. All registered sex offenders within a 3-mile radius were questioned. The missing persons poster described her as 5 feet tall with dark hair, last seen wearing her pajamas. Police discovered blood-like stains on Isabel's bedroom floor. A tarp and other items were removed from Sergio's car for testing. CPS visited the home, and then, weeks after Isabel disappeared, authorities made a decision that shocked the community. Sergio Celis was ordered to have no contact with his own sons. He moved out of the family house. For 6 months, Sergio lived separately from his family, barred from seeing his remaining children, while authorities gave no public explanation for why. The rumors started immediately. Some people pointed to Sergio's calm 911 call. Others noted that his strange demeanor in television interviews, relaxed, almost smiling, while his wife sat visibly devastated beside him. Local whispers suggested Sergio had connections to drug cartels, that Isabel had been taken as collateral for a debt, that police knew more than they were saying. The internet community was almost unanimous. They were convinced Sergio did it. They were wrong. While Tucson pointed fingers at the wrong man, the right man was hiding in plain sight. Christopher Matthew Clements was a registered sex offender. He had a conviction from 1998 in Oregon for attempted unlawful sexual penetration. He had a 2006 conviction in Florida for failure to register as a sex offender. When he was just 11 years old, he had been accused of molesting a very young child, though charges were never filed. He had lived in Oregon, Washington, Florida, Arizona, always moving, always one step ahead of scrutiny. At the time Isabel vanished in April 2012, Clements was living in Tucson, and investigators would later establish through cell tower data that his phone was active in the area around Isabel's home the night she disappeared. He had been watching children on his computer and devices. Investigators eventually found over 1,200 sexual images of prepubescent children. They found photographs taken secretly of young girls outside their homes. He had been stalking children in his neighborhood, photographing them from a distance, cataloging them, and buried in his backyard, literally buried in a plastic container in the ground, they found a small child's sweatshirt and homework with a name written on it, Mercedes, Isabel's middle name. He had kept a piece of her. After Isabel disappeared, the case went cold. Police stayed tight-lipped, leads dried up. The community searches stopped. The billboards stayed up, but the active investigation seemed to stall. Sergio's no-contact order was quietly lifted 6 months after it was imposed. With no explanation, he moved back into the family home. He and Rebecca remained married. They kept Isabel's bedroom ready for her. Years passed. And then, in 2014, another girl vanished in Tucson. Maribel Gonzalez was 13 years old. She disappeared on June 3rd while walking to a friend's house. Her body was found days later in a remote desert near Trico and West Avra Valley roads north of Tucson. Decomposed DNA evidence was collected. The cases weren't immediately linked publicly, but investigators were watching, and Christopher Clements was on their radar. February 2017, a woman called the FBI. She was Christopher Clements' fiancée, and she told them something that stopped investigators cold. Clements had written her a letter. In it, he claimed he knew where Isabel Celis was buried. FBI agents moved quickly. They located Clements. He was already sitting in a Pima County jail on unrelated burglary charges. They interviewed him. What happened next is one of the most disturbing moments in this entire case. Clements confirmed he knew where Isabel was, but he refused to lead them to her unless the burglary charges against him were dropped, and his car, which was being held as evidence, was released back to him. A 6-year-old girl, dead for 5 years, lying somewhere in the Arizona desert, and the man who put her there was negotiating. He was using her as a bargaining chip. Authorities agreed to his terms. On March 3, 2017, Nearly 5 years after Isabel vanished from her bedroom, Christopher Clements led FBI agents out into the desert. He directed them to a remote area near Trico and West Avra Valley roads. He pointed to a tree surrounded by dense brush. Investigators began searching. They found a few cranial bones near the tree. Then they widened the search. On their hands and knees, combing through the desert terrain, they found more and more scattered remains, weathered, partially skeletal, evidence of what time and the harsh Arizona desert does to what is left behind. Forensic specialists from Pima County Medical Examiner's Office later testified that one of the child's vertebrae was fractured, possibly from blunt force trauma. A fellow inmate had told investigators earlier that Clements claimed Isabel had been strangled, that chemicals had been poured over her body to destroy evidence, and that Isabel was never supposed to survive the kidnapping. She was 6 years old. She never made it to 7. While leading agents to Isabel's remains, Clements also pointed out an area of discarded tires nearby. That was the same area where Maribel Gonzalez's body had been found in 2014. Same location, same killer. When investigators searched Clements' devices, they found in his search history Isabel Celis, sexy, child killer found not guilty, body found in desert, Arizona cold cases. He had been following the investigation into the girl he murdered, watching to see if they were getting close. In his jail cell, investigators found something else, photographs hidden behind his Bible, photograph of the Celis home. He had kept them, hold on to them like trophies. Christopher Clements was indicted in September 2018 in connection with deaths of both Isabel Celis and Maribel Gonzalez. In September 2022, he was convicted of kidnapping and murdering Maribel Gonzalez and sentenced to natural life in prison. The Isabel Celis trial began in 2023. The first jury couldn't reach a verdict, mistrial. A retrial began in early 2024. This time the jury deliberated for approximately 10 hours. On February 29, 2024, nearly 12 years after Isabel vanished, Christopher Clements was found guilty of first-degree murder, kidnapping, and burglary in her death. At sentencing on April 10, 2024, both of Isabel's parents addressed the court. Her mother Becky stood before the man who had taken her daughter and said, "He took her childhood away from her. He took away a beautiful life presence. We will never get to see her grow into a beautiful woman, to watch her grow up, graduate high school, go to college." She then quoted the Bible, Matthew, "If anyone hurts or abuses these children, it would be better for him to have a heavy boulder tied around his neck and hurled into the deepest sea than to face the punishment he deserves." And then her father Sergio stood up, the man who had been suspected, whispered about, and pointed out over a decade by people who was certain that he had done something to his own daughter. He looked at the court and said, "Until the day I die, I will feel responsible for not doing my job and protecting my little girl from evil that lurked outside her window." Clements received natural life in prison plus 17 years for kidnapping plus 3.5 years for burglary, all consecutive. He addressed the court himself, criticized his trial, maintained his innocence, and said he didn't feel he had been given a fair hearing. The judge sentenced him anyway. Even with the conviction, this case does not have a completely clean ending. Clements claimed in a letter that there are 4 bodies buried in that desert area near Trico and Avra Valley roads. Isabel and Maribel account for 2. The other 2 have never been identified. 2 sets of remains somewhere out in the Arizona desert, belonging to people whose families may be still waiting for answers. This is the weight this case carries beyond Isabel's story. A predator who moved from state to state, who stalked children quietly and carefully, who killed at least twice that we know of, and who may have left more victims behind than anyone has yet been able to confirm. Clements is appealing both convictions, challenging the DNA evidence and the cell tower data used at trial. As of now, he is serving multiple natural life sentences. He will die in prison. There are cases where the internet got it right. This is not one of them. For years, thousands of people were absolutely certain that Sergio Celis had something to do with his daughter's disappearance. His 911 call was dissected frame by frame. His interviews were analyzed for signs of guilt. Theories about drug cartels and cover-ups spread across every true crime forum. And while all of that was happening, Christopher Clements was living his life in Tucson, free. He had crept through the window of a 6-year-old girl's bedroom, taken her into the desert, killed her, and then spent 5 years watching the investigation from a distance, searching her name online, keeping photos of her home hidden in a Bible, and a community spent those same 5 years pointing at the wrong man. This is the other lesson of this case, not just about the evil that exists in a quiet neighborhood, but about what happens when we decide we know the answer before the evidence is in. Sergio Celis lost his daughter, and then he spent years being treated like he was responsible for it. Isabel Mercedes Celis was a 6-year-old girl. She should have grown up, graduated, built a life. Instead, her father stood in a courtroom 12 years later and said he would spend the rest of his life feeling responsible for not protecting her from the evil that lurked outside her window. That evil had a name, Christopher Clements, and he will never see outside a prison again. This has been The Unknown Files. Rest in peace, little Isabel. Thank you for listening to this episode of The Unknown Files. I have done so many videos till now. I think this was the most hardest video for me to record. Oh my god, I currently am in tears, literally. This is crazy. Oh my god, a man losing his daughter. Oh, how can someone be so dark, so crazy to go to that level to kidnap someone, a little girl, someone's daughter, someone's sister, and then just kill her and then have no worries about it and just follow the case for so many years. Jesus, some people are just crazy. Rest in peace, little girl. Rest in peace, Isabel. May God bless you. Oh, she's in a better place. Oh my God. Thank you for listening anyway.